This week on Queen's Conversations, join hosts Lucia Dragos, Noran Omar, and me, John Collins, as we examine the alarming surge in attacks on Asian American people here in New York City and across the country. Our guests include New York State Senator John C. Liu, Michelle Tran, co-founder of Soar Over Hate and an Apex for Youth volunteer, Christine Toy Johnson, an actor and writer. She leads the Asian American Pacific Islander Healing Circles program, and the New York City 2021 Youth Poet Laureate, Serena Yang. And now, Queen's Conversations.
Recent news reports indicate an alarming surge in unprovoked attacks on Asian American people.
The attacks often include shouted slurs, threats and cries of "go back home, not your country," and "killer virus."
It's not clear what is motivating these vicious assaults.
The violence may be caused by pandemic stress, politics, or the power of simmering long-term racism.
We did find, however, that people and communities are responding in different ways to protect and offer help to any potential victims.
Today, we'll meet with some people who can help us understand the problem of these anti-Asian attacks and work to eliminate them.
Thanks to our guest joining us today. Michelle, you're a medical student, a co-founder of Soar Over Hate. Can you tell us what was your personal experience as an Asian American and how that led you to co-found the organization and what the organization does?
Yeah, sure. First off, thanks so much for inviting me here today and for holding this episode. This is a topic that's super important to discuss, and I'm really happy that you created a whole episode to talk about it. Yes, ever since the COVID-19 pandemic started this past in 2020, we've seen a huge escalation in hate crimes against Asians. I myself, as an Asian American woman in New York City, remember being worried about being attacked, equivalent to the worry about getting coronavirus. I was worried before, mask mandates were put out to wear a mask outside because Asian people who look like me, especially elderly, were getting attacked for wearing masks and protecting themselves and others. And, being on the subway, people would walk to the other side of the car, even though the whole subway was filled with other people, non-Asians, just to get away from me. And it was just a really horrible feeling of being treated like an other, even though I was born in California and I'm an American. And this has just escalated even further and affected many of my peers, including healthcare professionals. One of my classmates was attacked just a block away from our hospital. She was wearing scrubs on the way to the hospital, and someone came at her, called her Chinese virus, and scapegoated her for, she's not even Chinese, scapegoated her for causing a virus that she was helping combat and through her work. I've heard of nurses getting punched, residents getting spit on and coughed on, and it's really terrible to hear. And after the Atlanta spa shootings happened in particular, a month ago, I just could not take it anymore. It's really sad, a very sad time for me. And I was trying to think about what I could do to help. And I'm part of an organization called Apex for Youth, which is a nonprofit that connects young professionals to middle school and high school students, Asian immigrant youth in New York City, especially those from low-income backgrounds. And my mentee, 8th grade mentee, and I were discussing this rise of anti-Asian hate crimes and what we could do about it. And we talked about how there's a disproportionate amount of attacks targeting elderly and women. And so we brainstormed that we could gather together resources, leverage our networks, and we've been able to raise over $14,000, which we've used to buy personal alarms and pepper spray that we've given to senior homes, essential workers at small businesses in different Chinatowns, and various organizations serving the Asian American community. So,
Christine,
Yes.
you responded to this crisis in a slightly different way. An actor and a writer, you became a leader for something called Healing Circles. Can you give us a little bit of the idea behind what started Healing Circles, and
Yes.
what does a typical meeting look like?
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Well, Dominic D'Andrea from Queen's Theater approached me. We were both fellow playwrights, and he is the one that had the idea to hold space through Queen's Theater. Of course, it's virtual, to really be able to, for us to be able to sit in community together and talk about the things that that Michelle has been speaking about, and partially to gain support, partially just to have an ear. And so we have set up 4 different meetings for anyone who identifies as AAPI. The good thing about it being virtual is that people can come from all across the country. And it's been very moving to hold space for people to feel really candid, be able to be candid about what they're going through. It's important to me. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a person who tends to bring people together in conversation, trying to hold safe spaces for people to express themselves. And it's been very moving to hear, ranging from college students to older Asian American women, speak about how they have not had a place to talk about it, how that hasn't been acknowledged in their workplace or amongst their colleagues that this is even happening. And so the goal is simple. The goal really is just to hold space and sit in community with one another. And I think it's been very, very valuable to do that. We have 2 more left on the next 2 Tuesdays, April 27th and May 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can go to the Queen's Theater website and sign up. It's free, it's confidential, and held in the spirit of love and kindness.
Serena, as a young woman, what inspired you to become a member of the National Asian Pacific American Women Forum, and how has that impacted you to want to make a difference as a young woman to help the elders and anyone that is suffering this situation?
Well, first, thank you all so much for having me. And to that question, I have always been involved in community organizing, Asian American political activism for as long as I've written poetry. I kind of got into both of those things at the same time, and for me, they're inseparable. So I've only been a member of NAPOF, the NYC chapter, for about half a year. And that's just kind of in line with all the other organizations I've been a part of, because I think that while I write politically, all my work is political. I don't really, like when people ask me, is your poetry political? I don't find that to even be a question. Of course it is. I think that while that is true, my poetry is still just words. And in a time when people need housing, they need food, they need to feel safe when walking on the streets, my poetry can't give them that. So I think that my work with NAPOF is an important part of just my work for my community in general. And I've been inspired to join it just because of the kind of tradition of Asian American radical political activism that I've kind of joined ever since in high school, when I begun to get involved with these groups and also begun exploring my poetry.
Great. I have a short video that Michelle sent to me. I want to play it. It's very short, but for all of you to see the work that she's doing on the streets of New York.
Pull this out, it makes a loud noise to scare people away. And this is a flashlight. So if you want to stop it, you put it back in, the noise. You can leave it there and run away.
Yeah, oh, very good.
You
feel safer.
You feel safer. I carry it on the subway with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
how those people feel and what are some of the responses that you got?
Many of the people that we gave it to were very, very happy to receive these materials because they've been worried about going out alone. The worker that we gave the materials to, we provided 15 alarms and pepper spray for her female employees who've been worried about going home from Chinatown, especially after locking up at night. We've been given to various organizations. One group that we're going to give to soon just emailed me before this. They serve sex workers in Flushing, Queens, and they reached out about a trans individual who was attacked, who they served in their organization. So this is definitely a concern, and people want these materials really quickly. I'm going to do a distribution this Sunday to try to get them out to as many people as possible because this is a really immediate need that needs to be filled. Of course, the issues underlying hate, as you mentioned at the intro, are diverse and tough to tackle, of course. But in the immediate scenario, giving small things that help people feel more protected out on the streets make a difference and could even save a life.
Senator, first of all, thank you for taking time to deal with these important issues with us today. It's much appreciated. Can you explain to the audience if there's a history of bias against Asian Americans in our country?
Yes, there is. I do want to say that I am really honored and delighted to be on with Michelle and Christine and Serena. These are the voices that I think the people of Queens and all of our viewers want to hear and see. But to answer your question, Mr. Collins, this past year, there has been an escalation, as Michelle mentioned, a marked escalation in attacks of hate and bigotry against Asian Americans. I would say I wouldn't even call it an escalation as much as an absolute onslaught. It's been an onslaught. It's the numbers of which I have never seen in my lifetime. But you know, I've been around a while. It's the anti-Asian bias that we've seen is not new. Certainly not new in Queens. I've experienced it pretty much my whole life. I honestly thought a lot of it was past me. It was a long time ago, but this past year has really brought out some of the most painful and downright ugly memories that we could have. So if you ask, has there been a history of this? Yes, there's been a history of this in Queens. There's been a history of this in this country. This is a country where after Chinese immigrants finished the Transcontinental Railroad, the United States Congress thought it fit to pass a federal law to specifically ban people from China, the first of its kind, discriminating against an entire nation after they used the fruits of the labor. This is a country that created internment camps, I would say concentration camps during World War II, where supposed enemies of the state, Germans, Italians, and Japanese, were rounded up, property seized, and put into these camps. Oh, wait, I don't think it was Germans and Italians. I think it was just Japanese for some reason. And this is a country where after 9/11, South Asians were scapegoated like we have never seen humans scapegoated for something that they had nothing to do with before, attacked and killed. And now this past year, not unrelated to the former president's incessant and unrelenting use of the words China virus and Kung flu, which have now become lexicons of part of the modern day lexicon of anti-Asian slurs. There is definitely a pattern here. And, you know, as with all hate and bigotry, a lot of it is rooted in ignorance and fear. And it has been a very fearsome period of time when we have had so many people die, millions of people around the world, hundreds of thousands of Americans, right here in New York, tens of thousands of fellow New Yorkers. People are afraid, people have lost loved ones. The economic pain has been severe as well. And so people want some kind of easy thing to blame. And Asian Americans have bore the brunt of that blame, that scapegoating, no question about it.
A recent piece of legislation co-sponsored by Representative Grace Meng, among others, has just been dealt with in the House, I believe. What happened yesterday to that bill, and can you explain to us a little bit about what that bill proposes?
Grace Meng's, our congressmember from Queens, she proposed a bill, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, that would serve to more clearly identify hate crimes and empower the Attorney General to better catalog these incidents of hate, and among other measures. It's a pretty comprehensive bill that I certainly support as a state legislator, but Grace has passed it in the House, and I believe it is also going to pass the Senate. It may actually have passed the Senate
I think it
this
did.
week already. Yeah, because
Yes.
Senator Schumer was here in New York City on Monday, making the announcement that they intended to pass it in the United States Senate, as they had done so in the House. I was in Albany, so I couldn't join that news conference and announcement.
And do you think policing is more policing is the answer? What do you think the answer is?
I don't think policing is the long-term solution. I mean, you know, the more arrests, people talk, the mayor's talking about undercover cops. I mean, what are you gonna do? Have an undercover cop on every single corner? I mean, there's been so many attacks and incidents of hate. I think the real solution over time is education, as well as providing resources to the community. It's ridiculous that I thought it was bad when I was going in. I was in high school, and that was like, you know, in prehistoric times. Nowadays, you look at an American history textbook, and the only mention of Asians could be a one-paragraph mention about the railroads. And it hasn't changed in decades. So this is something that, as a member of the Education Committee in the New York State Senate, and having very close dealings with the state education department, which is where all our curricula for schools across the state are dealt with. This is something I'm looking very closely at. There needs to be a more comprehensive view of American history and where Asian Americans fit and how much we've contributed and the struggles that we've been through, so that we don't keep going through the same Groundhog Day syndrome over and over and over again.
I'm not interested in expanding the carceral state in any way. I want to specifically emphasize the fact that the elders, the Asian women, the massage workers, the sex workers who are extremely vulnerable to these physical incidents of violence have also historically been harassed by police. There are many Asian Americans who have never felt protected by police. So to Asian Americans who do feel like police make them safer, I want to ask you, who do you think the police make safer? Who benefits from that safety? I'm really interested in, for example, the work that Michelle does at NAPOF. We say, we keep us safe. We want to think of ways in which our community can protect ourselves, including the people who don't find any protection from the police. And like I said, because I'm not interested in expanding the carceral state, to be honest, I'm also not sure about hate crime legislation, because I think that more than interpersonal physical incidents of violence, there is ongoing violence against our communities in the form of gentrification, lack of affordable housing, in our US militarism at home and abroad. So I'm interested in this whole structure of anti-Asian violence that isn't just limited to interpersonal violent physical incidents.
What would you suggest for the youth members just like yourself to do to protect these elders? What can you suggest for us to do to make, like you said, we help the community to feel safer?
Well, I think like Michelle said that she started her work with her Apex mentee, who is a youth. I think that is a great example. And other youth like me can also become involved in organizations like NAPOF. I know a lot of youth are for the first time really thinking about anti-Asian racism, and I want to really encourage them to go beyond reactionary measures to this moment into long-term work, joining organizations like NAPOF, working on projects like Soar Over Hate. I think that's what strengthens our community.
Christine, you were nodding your head before and we interrupted you also. Can you share your experience and your thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to say that in my work in advocacy in the arts and media, we've been talking a lot about, and this goes back to John's question earlier about stereotypes. We've been talking a lot about how there is this direct line that we see between the underrepresentation of our stories being told through our lenses and the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes all the way to our dehumanization and our erasure, and the ramifications of that lead to this perception that we are expendable. And it has literally become a life and death situation. So through the arts and the media, that is another way that we're trying to not only educate people, but expand our perceptions of each other and everybody who is being marginalized.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Just to follow up on Senator Liu's statement, yes, policing might have an immediate short-term effect, but I think long-term, it's efforts that are like yours, Christine, like yours, Michelle, and like yours too, Serena, that will make the long-term change that we need take place. Serena, you took a different tack in a sense from providing physical comfort. You relied on your artistic abilities to create a product also that deals with this issue. You want to talk to us about that?
Yes, I have a poem today that I want to share, and I want to emphasize that actually I wrote this poem back in 2018 when I was involved with the WOW project in Chinatown as a Resist, Recycle, Regenerate fellow. I think that's important because this poem seems very relevant now. I could have written it yesterday, but all of these violences mentioned in this poem were happening in 2018, and that's why I wrote it then. So that's what I want to emphasize, is ongoing violence against Asian Americans that might look different from time to time, but is really the same.
Take it away.
Last night, I dreamed of Chinatown. Grand Street dried fish ama told the cop to 滚蛋, and the cop cowers. Because in Dream Chinatown, the police are afraid of 4'9" Chinese grandmas. Last night, I dreamed of Chinatown, and no one harassed Grand Street dried fish grandma, or Mulberry fake Gucci grandma, or Mott Street bakery grandma. In Dream Chinatown, Mott Street Ama gave me free white rabbits and a bucket of paint, and I vandalized every hip new shop on Canal. I painted the zodiac with overgrown horns and barbed mother tongues and unbound bleeding feet. A hissing snake swallowed the new art gallery whole. A cow sat on the luxury development and flattened it. Overnight, I made Canal ugly again, impolite, made it stink of fish and counterfeit everything. In Dream Chinatown, Grandma got her heat and water back. Grandma dug a hole back home and fell through the earth to the far side of Bayard. In Dream Chinatown, people bowed, 90 degrees, eyes on your feet, filial piety in the curve of your back. In Dream Chinatown, squares of laundry flapped like wings from fifth floor windows. Youtiao and dabing sold on the side of the road for $1.50. I walked arm in arm with Grandma down Mott, and she said, I am happy you grew up here. Last night, I dreamed of Chinatown, and the streets were paved with gold. Last night, I dreamed of Chinatown. I dreamed the children home like a monsoon, and the swampland grew wet and green again.
What a beautiful way to end the show. Thank you so much.